Today, we're going to be discussing boomers are refusing to hand over their $84 trillion in wealth to their children until they pass on. Johnny, this is an interesting topic, wouldn't you say?
I'd say so, yeah. This one, well, being a senior citizen, I expect this one to be really very important.
I agree. Now, let's talk about some of the reasons behind it. Obviously, this massive transfer of wealth is going to be taking place over the next several years as the patriarch of the family tends to die off and go on. And so let's talk a little bit about why you think that they're waiting until the very last moments. And I'll give my input on this as well.
Okay, well, I'll toss out one that is fairly obvious to me because I'm up in my 80s and, I'm certainly thinking about medical issues and things of that nature. I'm very
Yes.
fortunate. I'm perfectly healthy. I have no reason to go to a doctor, but it's one of the things that is a high expense item for a lot of senior citizens.
Yes.
And if they don't have money squirreled away to handle their medical issues, this could be a real risk. So some of them are holding on to cash because they know, either due to their family background or something having to do with something that's occurred to them recently, they know they've got to be prepared to handle medical costs, and they are outrageous now. I mean, it's really expensive to go into a hospital or even just get your GP to do something for you. So,
Mm.
yeah, to
Makes
me,
sense.
this is a big deal.
No, I mean, it's interesting that you brought up that aspect. I'm looking at it more as the family office aspect in terms of, ultra high net worth families waiting to the very moments till they pass on to hand the reins over to the kids. And, part of the reason why I see that, based on just sitting in the room with a handful of these ultra high net worth families is that it comes down to trust. They don't feel that the heirs, they can trust them enough to carry on their legacy.
That's right. Yeah, I'm laughing because that's exactly another thought that went through my head. Uh, Oftentimes, the younger generation doesn't trust the older one. And I can assure you that the same thing holds true for the older one, not trusting the younger one.
Mhm.
It's within my own family too that I've seen this happening, and it's craziness. But
Yeah,
that's the way things happen when you get up into senior level living. And
mhm.
all of these things suddenly come to being extremely critical and important issues.
Yeah, I would agree on that. Part of it, I look at it as succession planning. What are your thoughts on that? Because, I had the privilege to sit in the room with Gail Miller, and their family's worth about $4 billion. And listening to her, because I believe they have about four or five children that are probably, I want to guess they're in their 60s, right? But she's
Yeah.
still at the helm of driving that family. And so she was talking about how what she did, because she didn't have any education, especially after Larry Miller passed on. And so she literally took the reins over, and she brought in, for a whole year, she brought in all of these top educational people from Harvard, all these educational people to really guide that succession planning for the family.
Yeah, that's a good use of the funds of the family to help educate and to equip people for what they will be doing with the money eventually.
Hmm.
Um, you know, Sometimes I've known people when they come into money, they just kind of blow it every which way.
Yes.
And without good planning and without good guidance by not only professional money handlers and persons who can handle planning, but also the legal aspects.
Hmm.
It's a very complex situation. And to me, without good guidance, you can really get in deep fast and end up blowing that fortune.
Yeah, no, I agree. And that's why you see third and fourth generation families tend to diminish over that period of time. So I want to talk a little bit about, from your point of view, what are some of the steps that these ultra high net worth families can put into place to make that transition a lot less scary? I think it's really scary for the, patriarch of the family to turn over the reins. I just speaking to a friend of mine whose family is of significance, and her father recently had a heart attack of some sort, and it's really thinking about how do you trust the children to take that over.
I think that, first of all, it's not something you're going to do overnight. I think it's going
Yeah.
to take several months, maybe a year or two, to educate everybody as to what the elders' wish would be, and then to outline how money perhaps should be allocated and then used over time so as to sustain it over a number of different generations.
Mhm.
So education is the key to this. And so they should bring in appropriate people with backgrounds who have dealt with this before. And of course, in the case of family offices, deal with individuals who have done this for their own families and get counsel or guidance and suggestions from those who have done this as to what did they try, what worked, and what did they run into that they weren't ready for, and that suddenly became an issue.
I mean, I absolutely agree on that. And the problem is that, as you know, families have disputes and everybody has their own vision of what they want to do, and maybe the younger generation has a completely different view on the world as well.
Oh, I agree. In fact, the more I thought about this topic today, I was going over a whole series of things, and each generation has a different view of the world based on current events as well as those things that have taken place earlier. And our world is changing rapidly. What we thought we knew about life 20 years ago is drastically different today. Back 20 years ago, we're talking about post Twin Tower collapse and the imposition of all kinds of restrictions on airline flights. And, you name it, there's just one thing after another that occurred. And so that has an impact on how people look at how they're going to spend that money.
No, I agree on that one. I agree. And so, as families are thinking about transferring this wealth, I really think they need to start building that trust, and how you do it. Not only trust, personal trust, but there's different vehicles of trust that you can use to really carry out the vision and mission of, let's say, the older generation. Don't you think that's true?
Absolutely true. Yes. And, this is one of those times when you don't want to go racing into it and try to flip through it in a month or two. I think this is of high consequence. And so cool heads have to prevail here. And there has to be a period of time where ideas are proposed, different rational thoughts given, emotional thoughts, give them a chance to blow out, go through the entire process in terms of what's going to happen, what would it look like, what would the consequences be if something happened, and then what do you do to recover from a bad decision?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that point up. And so what are some of your final thoughts before we tie it up here?
Well, I think that this is one of those topics that most people really don't want to discuss, quite frankly.
True.
You know, talking about death and dying, and the fact that as you're getting older, you are at higher risk. I can tell you that for the most part, people do not want to discuss it. And it's one of those things that they have to do, though. And, begrudgingly, they're going to go to the meetings. They're going to listen to the legal people, persons with medical backgrounds, perhaps for certain kinds of situations in a family, and a variety of other experts. And this is why it should take at least a year, in my opinion, possibly 2, and maybe even 3 to sort it all out.
Yeah, depending on, the type of wealth, right?
Oh, yeah. And, if they're operating businesses, for example, who's going to take over and run those businesses? That's a
Yeah.
very big one.
Yeah.
And if you don't have the proper persons in place to take care of it, this could be a forthcoming disaster. It's one thing to think about simply moving money from one generation to another, but when there are businesses or various other kinds of organizations involved, this is very complex. And so it should be done carefully.
Absolutely. Well, today you've been listening to boomers are refusing to hand over their $84 trillion in wealth to their children until the very last minute. You've been listening to John Tabor and myself, Rose Vitale. I'm the founder of the Female Founders Institute, where our sole mission is to educate women on entrepreneurship and innovation for women. Cheers.
Cheers.